most of the time we call it an invisible disability. So how do you, for example, look at the force continuum? The force continuum is the levels of force that as an officer you choose to use in order to get a subject or a person to adhere to your demands or your actions, right? You're asking them to be complacent with your questions, right? The use of force continuum is what we're taught. So as officers, we have to see what the threat is, what use of force we will have to use, and what is justified as far as that force. So the bottom line, the first amount of force is just simple presence. Just the simple presence of an officer in uniform is on the force continuum. That is the very bottom line, right? And as you go on, obviously you've seen on the news because, using the use of weapons, deadly force, that is the top and most lethal force that who is being the subject of the matter and also everybody around. But where does neurodiversity fall in that use of force? Where do our loved ones fall in that force continuum? And I need officers not to say, oh, well, here we go, another hater of the force. I don't. I love law enforcement. But when my son is stopped by you and Shane gets nervous and he starts to get twitchy and he's moving back and forth and he starts to etch back a little bit because he feels as though he's getting too close and he needs room to breathe and decompress before having the sensory meltdown. Where does neurodiversity fall in the force continuum that you won't immediately go for impact weapons that might be a expandable baton to strike him because you think you're being defiant, or worst case scenario, lethal weapon because maybe he has that flight scenario. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm going towards the parents. You need to have a conversation, if possible, in teaching your loved one on what interactions with law enforcement looks like. So how do you do that, Jay? You do that by going around to your local law enforcement office, introducing yourself, going around to the local fire department, introducing yourself, letting your loved one see what an officer looks like, see the red and blue lights, the car, the fire truck, in the SB, in the tank, in the mask, in all the gear. That's the accountability that you have as a parent. So that now we're playing tennis with law enforcement. Up, you know what? I took my loved one to the station. You guys seen my loved one. If they have a premise report, I put my loved one's information in the CAD system. So it doesn't matter if you get a part-timer or someone from a different district as a lateral change. When they come on shift and they get a call from my house because my son or my daughter is having a meltdown, accountability is in the system. I did my part. Now it's time for your part in order to come to this situation and handle it in a less lethal fashion. That's how these interactions need to take place. We got to get checked as a parent and we got to get checked as law enforcement. But when we're checking each other, we're still sitting down at the table and be like, okay, now that we got our feelings out the way, how do we make this safer for our loved ones moving forward? What does that look like? And that's what I teach. That's what I teach. I do trainings with law enforcement now. That's what I teach because I know this is what needs to happen. There is not one agency in this entire country that can tell me that they have consistent training for autism. You can't tell me. I've been through the training academy. You can't tell me.
Yeah. Part of it is the fear that some communities have with speaking with their law enforcement, and, it's obvious that, especially with our community, our Black community, our relationships can be strained.
Mhm.
So it's a lot easier for maybe for other folks to approach a police officer and talk to law enforcement, explain to them that they have a child that's on the spectrum, just like to introduce you to them. You know, um, that was something that we did when we were living in Upper Marion. Tanya, my wife, decided that I want the local law enforcement to know who our children are.